As I said, I'm Joy Chege from PAAN. I am the marketing and communications lead. And for those of you who are joining a PAAN session for the first time, just to let you know what PAAN is, this is the Pan-African Agency Network. We are bringing together the creative ecosystem across Africa and the African diaspora, and we're just trying to encourage collaboration, partnerships, knowledge sharing in sessions such as this one. And yeah, elevating the continent's marketing and creative ecosystem. So for today, this session is proudly sponsored by Dochase. If you haven't heard of them, Dochase is a programmatic advertising and media technology platform, and they help brands and agencies deliver more targeted, efficient campaigns across different markets. They work across Africa, and they've been helping different advertisers understand their audiences and improve campaign performance as well. So they are the perfect partner for us today, and we're very glad to have them on board. And together with them, we'll be discussing this topic with a few other panelists who have different areas of expertise across the agency ecosystem. So just to introduce who we have with us today, I'll start with Chibuike Good News Njoku, who is going to be delivering today's keynote address. He is the CEO at Dochase, and he brings strong expertise in digital audience targeting and campaign technology. So I'll let him say a quick hello and tell you a bit about himself.
Hi, good day, everyone. Good morning if you are from Nigeria, and good afternoon if you are in Kenya. As she said, my name is Chibike, and I lead the team at Dochase. We're a technology platform with presence in a number of African countries. We're also partners to many of the global platforms, and they use our services to reach African audience.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us today. And also from Dochase, we have Abiodun Mudele, who is the head of business there, and he brings deep experience helping brands scale across Africa, and just helping you improve your campaign performance. So Abiodun, you can say a quick hello and let the audience know a bit about you.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Abiodun. I'm from Nigeria. I'm the head of business at Dochase, and I think you guys already said what we do at Dochase. So I help run the business here in Nigeria.
All right.
Nice meeting you.
It's great to have you. Yes. We're also joined by Yomi Amusa, who is the founder and managing director at Omni Options. That's an agency that's part of the PAAN network, and they're based in Nigeria as well. So Yomi, you can say hi, tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Thanks, Joy. My name is Yomi, as Joy has said. I run Omni Options. It's a creative tech company, a fusion of a creative agency and a tech company. And we do quite a bit, both in core advertising and other things, but also quite a few things in tech as well. And it's a pleasure to be here. We also actually operate in the UK as well as in Ghana. So that's the scope of our operations. Thank you. Looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Yomi. And last but not least, we have Alvin Oang, who is the marketing manager at Kwetu Marketing Agency. And they'll be sharing also some local market realities, especially from the East African side of things. So yes, Alvin, you can also say hello and tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Good morning and good afternoon across the continent. My name is Alvin Oang. I'm the marketing manager at Kwetu. Just a bit about Kwetu. We are basically a digital marketing solution agency where we look to come up with custom fit solutions for different types of businesses, from SMEs all the way across to large-scale businesses. We also are focused on market entry marketing for companies that are looking to enter through East Africa. We've been in the space for over a decade, and we cover everything that means digital, from website building all the way to social media management and marketing. So that's a bit about us and what we do. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
A pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for all of you, for being here. We appreciate you making time for this discussion. But before we begin, just a few quick notes for the attendees. So firstly, this session is being recorded. So you'll be able to access the recording after. We'll share that on email. It will also be on our PAAN channels on our social media platforms. So if you want to revisit some of the insights, or if you're not able to stay throughout the whole discussion, don't worry, we'll be able to send that through. And that goes also for the presentation that will be shared by Dochase today. Then if you have any questions as we are going through the session, you can drop those in the chat. And we also have the Q&A active. So any questions or comments that you have as we proceed with the discussion can be dropped there. And we'll address those at the end. We'll have just some time for an audience Q&A where we can, go through those. All right, so as I said, we'll have Dochase setting the stage for today's discussion, led by Chibuike. And I'd love to invite him now to give us that keynote address and before we can get into the panel discussion. Over to you, Chibuike.
Hi, everyone. Like I said before, good morning from Lagos and good afternoon in Nairobi. And I don't know the time it is in South Africa and other parts of the world.
It looks like we've lost Chibuike. Chibuike, can you hear us? Okay, I can just give him a minute to reconnect. Ricky says it's 11 a.m. in South Africa. So I think we're the ones who are ahead of you because first it's midday here. All right, I think Chibuike has dropped off. Let's just give him a minute. If you're just joining us, you can say hi in the chat and let us know where you're listening from. But yes, we're just waiting for Dochase. They'll be giving us a bit of a keynote on programmatic and digital advertising and setting the stage for this discussion on how to reach the right audience at the right time. Okay. Abiodun, are you able to reach Chibuike?
I've tried to, but let's give him like a few seconds.
All right, no problem. Yeah, apologies for that.
I think it's back on the call now.
Okay, hi Chibuike.
He's back now.
Yeah. Got disrupted.
Your audio is not coming through very clearly.
But can you hear me? Trying to screen. Let me share it again. You can see my screen. Just give it a thumb up.
Chibuike, we still can't hear you clearly. You're cutting in and out, but we can see your screen now.
Can you see my Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Can you hear me now? I think
Yes.
it's always fluctuated for a while, but it should stabilize now.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
hear
I
you
think
now.
it's dragging. Yeah, it's dragging, but it just takes a bit of time to stabilize. But
All
if
right.
you can hear me, let me know so I can proceed.
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you so much. It's also one of the things we see in Africa. One of the things that we have to get used to as Africans is the fact that internet is not stable. Connectivity can go anytime. In fact, in some countries, like my country, it's not just a thing of connectivity, it's also a thing of power, because power is the root of everything. The telcos rely on power, connections rely on power. So then, of course, the infrastructure that powers our internet connectivities are not stable. So we often experience those things as normal things, but I sincerely apologize for that. Let me start to share my screen again to confirm. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
We
I can
can.
see it.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'll be talking about scaling campaigns across Africa. And this addresses especially some of the agencies here who have clientele across different countries. Africa is a fantastic place to do business. Um, And the approach we use to spread campaigns across this market will have to be unique, and that is what we'll be talking about today. So we'll talk about key points like the opportunity in Africa, the audiences, the channels, the targeting, then measurement across Africa, and then the playbook. Uh, Africa has about 1.4 billion people across 54 countries. But that's the fastest growing population in the world. If you look at other continents, they're experiencing either population decline or population stagnation. But Africa has a fast growing population. We also have average number of about 60% of our population are under 25 years of age, which means in the next few years we will have um, most Africans in different parts of the world. And it also means we have a very active population of people on the internet. And then 700 million of those people are on mobile phones, and that's over half the population of Africans. And like I said before, connectivity is a problem, but as connectivity improves, we could be having higher number of Africans in on the internet in places like Nigeria, Kenya, um, South Africa. We have between 47 and up to 47 and up to 60% of the population on the internet. But if you look at countries out of Africa, like in the US or in certain parts of Europe, you're talking about 80 to 90% of the population on the internet. So, which means we still have a lot of growth parameters that are going to be activated. And as we activate those parameters, we'll see a whole lot of market for them. So Africa remains the fastest growing market in everywhere in the world. And uh, the key, let's say, countries that are driving this growth, we categorize them into three, but this is not exhaustive because we have 54 countries, but there are key countries that we use as benchmarks for this. Now we have the anchor market, which includes Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt. Then the tier two markets, which includes Ghana, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire, and then the emerging markets like Rwanda, Senegal, and this. I'll give context to this. This is with no prejudice to any country, but the truth is these have been based on data. Now, the emerging markets are heavily untapped, but they have fantastic opportunities. You could see a Rwanda there, which has very high internet penetration, but there are some reasons why it is there. Now, looking at individual anchor markets, you see Nigeria, which has a population of over 200 million people, but 62 million of those people are on the internet. And that is actually growing. And Nigeria is a dominant market in West Africa. And then it also has the highest ad spend. And some people call us the giant of Africa. I think it's a position we drag with South Africa. We always drive about who is the giant and who's not the giant. Um, but it has deeper consumer segmentations and is a mandatory market. So when you go out of Africa and people are talking about how they want to penetrate markets in Africa, the key things are how do we get to Nigeria, or how do we get to South Africa or Kenya or Egypt? And if you look at Kenya as well, out of a 57 million population, you have about 16 to 20 million of those users uh, are very unique, and the top websites on those places are also unique. Now, if you look at a country like Nigeria, if you want to reach majority of the people in Nigeria, you'll be talking about Truecaller, because a lot of people use Truecaller to know who is calling them. AudioMark, Phoenix Browser, LiveScore, Opera Mini, and then Punch. I don't know if you observe something here. Most of these platforms that are used to reach Nigeria actually not Nigerian, except for Punch. But that's a discussion for another day. Now, if you look at Kenya, for example, you see that Kenya has 16 to 20 million users on M-Pesa, and which is a very unique audience. And the top platforms are Tuko, The Messenger, Boomplay, Movie Arc, and a lot. Now, Kenya is the East Africa gateway as well. It has fantastic premium audience, especially for the fact that we have higher literacy in Kenya than many of the neighbors, and it's also an elite population. So adoption of digital products is quite easier there than many other places. And then South Africa again, South Africa is economically uh, bigger, but of course, a 62 million population is also a fantastic one. And then they have about 68% internet penetration, which also make them a very key market. Now, the top places where you can get most of South Africans are like Daily Motion, Radio South Africa, News 24, Yahoo, and then is Africa's most developed market. It also has similarities with Europe, similarities with America when it comes to digital usage and digital advertising. Egypt has a 105 million population, and then 78 million unique internet users. And then it's also the gateway to North Africa and Arab Africa. Now, there are a number of other markets, but these are key priorities when it comes to understanding the people in Africa. Now, it is totally wrong to assume that 54 countries in Africa are going to be a turnkey, or you're just going to run a single campaign that will cut across all these markets, because these are 54 countries with very, very unique differentiators in terms of the consumer preferences, the consumer behaviors, the websites they visit, the platform they spend their time on, the languages, income via differentials, and also their attitude to internet. For example, in Nigeria, if you deploy an advert in Nigeria, people will see your advert. First few weeks, they'll just be looking at it, but they won't do anything. Then maybe after 3 weeks, some of them will just click, check the website, check where you're selling, but they won't buy. Then maybe after 3 months, they now come back and say, okay, it seems this brand is quite serious, or they start associating it with confidence, they start being more convinced about that. Now, but if you also run a similar campaign in place like Kenya, you see people respond more faster, but uh, um, that doesn't mean the Nigeria do not respond to things on the digital space, but it's just that they have, let's say, they have a process that they use, so they do not respond pretty fast. But in other markets, it's faster. Even in more advanced countries, you could deploy a product on the internet today, and in 30 days, you have a whole lot of people buying it. But in African countries, people will consider a whole lot of things around the pricing, around the product suitability, and at the time you are actually doing that product, it may not even be the time that their salary has come in that they want to buy the product. So the consumers have a behavior. First, 80% of all the consumers in Africa use mobile. I think it's even more than that because um, in other continents, we had a journey from desktop, or from what I say mainframe computing to desktop and then to mobile. But in Africa, these are young population who are 25 and below, have never used a desktop. In fact, there are some people that you would talk to on the internet today, all they know is mobile phone. They have never used a desktop. They have never seen what it is to access a product on the internet using a desktop. So mobile is always a first consideration. So that informs what you're going to do around the orientation of the product, orientation of the campaign, orientation of whatever marketing you are deploying across African markets. And then we also love communities in the sense that um, in Africa, we will buy something if we associate it with maybe somebody we already know offline, or somebody we have built trust in. So word of mouth kind of influences purchase decisions. And then price. This is a huge factor that determines the purchasing decisions of majority of the people on the internet. Now, if a product, take for instance, Netflix. When Netflix came, the pricing in Nigeria is different from the pricing in other markets. Because if you use the pricing that works across the globe and you deploy it here, people will not buy. But you have to adopt to a price that works here. That same also works for beverage brand like Coca-Cola. If you see the price in Nigeria, for example, it's different from the price in Kenya. It's different from the price in the streets of New York. It's different from the price in the streets of France. But you have to bring your product to something that is quite affordable for this growing population. And then the payment is also fragmented. So if you're selling something that fulfillment requires to be done over the internet, you realize that you need to work on different payment methods across this market. In Kenya, we've had huge success in mobile payment, but you will not say the same thing in places like Uganda, places like even Ghana, even Senegal. Some countries in Africa still find it difficult to use card payments in the first place. So, choosing the right channel across Africa is also a major factor. Now, there are global platforms that have high penetration in this market, but the consumer decisions are also different in some of these platforms. Take, for instance, Meta has a wide reach across all the ages, especially in Africa. But it's also interesting to note that the Gen Zs in Nigeria do not use Meta. So if you just make assumption that, okay, if you want to advertise to people that are maybe 28 and below, and you go and spend all your budget on Meta, on Facebook, unfortunately, those guys have run away from there. And their reason has been because the millennials and their fathers and mothers have all gone to Facebook. So the Gen Zs ran away from the Facebook and left them. So they don't want a situation where they go post the things they love, or they go express themselves, and then their mother do a meeting a house meeting and summon them and start asking them, hey, why did you post this and all that? So they've run away from Facebook. They've gone to TikTok, they've gone to Instagram. And so if you want to target these markets, you have to be sensitive around the mix of these channels that you're going to use. But if you look at other countries, you see that these platforms actually cut across all ages. But in Africa, it is totally different. Also, Google search is a major one, but in recent times, you realize that platforms like Reddit have started commanding volumes in Africa. Platforms like other social platforms have started commanding volumes, and then TikTok, it has become a very major dominant place in Africa because it is video first, and is also helps these guys express themselves, connect them to communities they love, connect them to aspiring influencers they love. So, depending on the kind of audience you're trying to target, uh, you will see that this kind of tools or platforms become real interesting to have to tailor your campaign to the target audience based on the people you want to achieve. And then deciding on the channel should also be a decision that should be based on the audience you want to target. Then we also have programmatic platforms like Dochase, where we connect agencies, direct advertisers, and also advertisers to reach global reach platform like DV360 will connect them also to places that ordinarily you will not take your campaign to, because audience cut across this. So on a digital platform like the DSPs, we've been able to connect all the platforms, including Meta, TikTok, Instagram, and all these things, bringing them together to ensure that you have one single source to all this. But it also means that in your targeting, you now have to differentiate that. We also have the streaming platforms, which is quite a growing aspect. While data is a major consideration in Africa, but you see that streaming is still growing. So you look at things like Showmax, which is growing, and then recently Netflix is also coming up with advertising, so which makes it interesting. We also have the connected TVs. I don't. If you check, if you have smart TVs in your house, check the idle moments of those TVs have started showing adverts. Now you wonder how did those adverts get there? Is because some of the brands that have gone to platforms like the DSPs like Dochase to run campaigns are able to target those idle screens on the TVs, connected TVs, and all those places that people are streaming. So the channel mix is a major consideration when it comes to deciding. Of course, we will also not overlook the offline channels. Now, there's always going to be a connection between what people saw online and what they saw offline, because in Africa, especially in Nigeria, people will go online to check the prices of goods, and then they go offline to go and buy them. Or you run a campaign offline, but people will go and do the fulfillment online. So it's always a mix of that. I'll give you this instance. There was a betting company that had sponsored a very big show in Africa on TV, and they didn't have an online advert that was running. Now, what happened was, by the time there was a lot of awareness on that TV show, there was no ride on that on the digital to make these guys. Now, when we had a conversation with this CEO, what we told him, like, look, you spend $1 million to sponsor a TV show. What if these guys do not have a way to buy this product? Because you're a betting company and you are online. and you expect them to go search you. No, you should have a way of connecting those TV, that traffic on those terrestrial TV to the activities, because while that TV show is going on, a lot of them are going online to go and check those characters, to go and do a banter on that, to go and discuss what is happening on those TV shows. Now, a combination of TV advert and online advert gives you a direct connection to these customers. So when they have got a first impression of of the product on the TV, they now go on the internet to do a banter and they see the ad. It's a direct response. You see, they just click, they register, and then they buy the product. Now, when you are having a plan to deploy, or when you're deploying a campaign on in this market, you need to consider a combination of these two. When you're having, and they all play significant parts in terms of influencing what the customer buys. And now these offline are just going to create that confident awareness, and also they're also going to help these users to build the trust. But the actual event may actually happen online, and for those that are offline, the actual event may happen offline, but you need a combination of this. And then there's also the SMS, which is connects people that you have, which is helping to also reach people that are not necessarily online at every point in time. Now, Africa has.
Hi, Chibuike, sorry to cut you short. Just in the interest of time, if you could wrap up in about a minute or so that we can get into the panel discussion. Because I'm seeing, yeah, we're not doing very well on
All right.
time.
All right, that's fine. So I'll breeze through the other part of it. Now, you also need to be mindful of the times. We have the best times, 6 in the morning to 8 a.m. This is when people are spending their time on WhatsApp. And then another best time is also 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. when people have come back and they are relaxing on their time. Now, in between that is the lunch time when people, just take a little time to look at the internet, but the decisions are made first in the morning and then in the evening. Now, targeting audiences, you have to consider the geography. So, like I've said, you also have to consider the socioeconomic and their behaviors. You also need to be mindful about the languages, the voices. You cannot use the same artists across all the African countries. You also cannot use the same models or the same currency across. If you're expecting somebody in Nigeria to buy something and you put it in dollar, definitely they will not buy. The same applies to Kenya, but if you can localize the currency, you see more on that. Then measurement in Africa is also quite interesting. Now, in other countries, people respond properly on to campaigns, but here people first respond in by just observing. So awareness is a major consideration, but retention is the ultimate thing. Now you need to move people from awareness to retention, which is the goal of every brand. Retention is the fact that people have bought product and they can always come back and buy those products again. So I'll go through the playbook because of the time. Now, to deploy a campaign across African countries, you need to first of all launch across these key markets that I've talked about, then do an A/B testing around your creatives, the mix of the channels, and that they adapt that campaign to the local markets, to the language, the culture, the cues, and the pricing. Then after you've seen that data, then you can start expanding it to other countries in the Francophone countries, and then other markets where you have seen it. But bear in mind, by whatever sells in Nigeria, we sell in Ghana, and whatever sells in Kenya, we sell in Rwanda, and all of that. Then you can measure and iterate on that. But it is totally wrong to assume that Africa is one market, and don't also assume that what sells in Europe or in America or in Asia is going to sell in Africa. It won't. Africa has its own unique approach, and those things must be respected when you are deploying campaigns to them. Now, in terms of the tools, we recommend using media buying platforms, especially the DSPs and the cross-channel platforms that give you access to all these audiences. Now, this helps you to get the audiences, to measure them, and also to deploy campaigns across them. Then we also have the presence of AI. In recent times, artificial intelligence have started, moving us faster to what advertising is going to be. And I also want to introduce us to Retain. But allow me to play this 30-second video that talks about what Retain is about and how it works across Africa.
Campaign in under 5 minutes. Let me show you how. Head to retaindigital.io and click Get Started. You can sign ads on Meta, Google, and TikTok. Shouldn't take days of work or a full marketing team. With Retain, you'll launch your first AI-powered ad campaign in under 5 minutes. Let me show you how. Head to retaindigital.io and click Get Started. You can sign up with Google, email, or any of our login options. The moment you sign up, you'll get a 10-day free trial of our premium plan, plus $5 of starter credit added to your wallet. That's enough to test everything. No credit card needed up front. First, tell Retain what you're selling. Click Products, then add new product. The fastest way? Just paste your website link and your social handles. Retain's AI visits your site and your social pages, then automatically figures out your brand colors, your tone of voice, your offerings, and who would actually buy from you. In about 30 seconds, you'll see 3 or 4 buyer personas, real customer profiles with photos, ages, interests, and what motivates them to buy. This is the audience your ads will target. Now, let's create your first campaign. Click Campaigns, then New Campaign. Pick the product you just added, choose your goal, and set your budget. Pick the platforms you want to advertise on. You can run on Meta, Google, TikTok, and more, all from one place. Don't know which one to pick? Select 2 or 3 and let the data tell you what works best. Set your location, age range, and targeting options, or just leave the defaults. Retain has already used your personas to pre-fill smart targeting for you. Click Generate, and Retain's AI writes your headlines, captions, and designs your ad images and videos, all matched to your brand and personas. Love something? Keep it. Want to change a headline? Click and edit. Before you launch, top up your...
For the benefit of time, let me stop it here. But we'll drop the access to this so you can go and explore that. Now, but this is the advent of AI into advertising, where AI is going to help to expedite the process of advertising and also help to deploy these campaigns across different channels simultaneously. It kind of makes life pretty easy for those who are deploying in Africa. Let me thank you very much. Let me take some questions.
Thank you, Chibuike. For the questions, we'll take them at the end. So if anybody has a question on the presentation, you can drop it in the chat or the Q&A. But thank you for the presentation. As he said, we'll share this document with you so you can go through the parts that we weren't able to cover in detail. And you can also reach out to Dochase if you have any questions or you'd like to partner and work with them. Thank you so much. And so now we'll move into our panel discussion, which again is just on what we've covered through that presentation. So just getting into more depth and more localized or regional conversation. And just to start with setting some context, to you, Yomi, I would like you to just tell us what are the biggest shifts that you've seen in audience behavior across African markets in the recent years?
Yeah, thank you, Joy. And first of all, to make a really amazing presentation and amazing stuff you guys are doing at Dochase. It's a great work. To the question, interestingly, having worked across the continent, north, south, west, and partially in the Eastern African market, one thing that I've sort of noticed, and I think Chibuike's presentation touched on that, is the fact that the African consumer is evolving quickly. And if we discount that reality, the honest truth is that advertising ends up being water on a duck's back, right? So understanding how quickly the customer is evolving is critical and is important in being able to ensure that you are, sort of fitting hand in glove, or, putting round pegs in round holes. So I think one of the things, and just to give an example of that, is, to Chibuike's point about, Meta versus TikTok as platforms, is even the fact that how TikTok has even become a key social commerce platform as much as itself, or even the fact that, interestingly, how WhatsApp as a platform that was originally just for conversations has become something entirely different. And that brings me to another point, and that's the fact that we are in a sense also in what I would call a pseudo buyer's market. And what I mean by a pseudo buyer's market is the sense that a lot of the times when we create platforms and whatnot, what actually determines the extent to which they become viable as even ad platforms in themselves is actually adoption and behaviors that the customers begin to show. Because what you tend to find is that a platform can be created with one intent, but the way in which it is used and which consumption around that platform occurs could then create new opportunities for ad involvement and so on and so forth. So I think the most important thing I've seen is the evolution of the customer and having a finger on the pulse of that evolution, which is what really helps brands enjoy or benefit from that evolution. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think on what you were saying about evolution of platforms, for instance, with TikTok becoming a search engine and now even incorporating a lot of advertising, that wasn't the case previously. So I think, keeping an eye on those trends is very important. To Abiodun and then also Alvin, I'd like to hear your perspective on this. Just from a business perspective, what are the data points that you use for Abiodun when you're advising the agencies or the brands who want to advertise with Dochase? What data points should they rely on when they're trying to understand their audience better? I know Chibuike touched on quite a number of them, but yeah, practically in the campaigns that you run, what does that look like?
Thanks very much, Joy. And it's a privilege to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. Chibuike has spoken at length on what it's like in terms of behavior shifts. And Yomi has also explained a lot about giving more context to that, basically. So besides your standard, what I would call gender, age, and all of those other stuff, the most important metrics that we should pay attention to now for campaigns is actually behavioral metrics. So you want to be concerned about things like what time are your target audience actually online. So there's a new definition to always on. So people used to think that when you say always on, it means you are always everywhere at every time, and that sounds like a lot of money being spent down the drain. But that's not the definition of always on now. It means you are always on, but always on only at the time when your target audience is also on and where they are also on. So you want to consider the different time zones that you're advertising on at the same time. So if, for example, you're running a campaign that is targeted at audiences at Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, you have to understand that they are not all commuting home at the same time, if that is the time you're trying to target. They're not all waking up at the same time. You have to be able to code switch to make sure that one language is more popular here, what language is more popular in the other country. And then you have to also look at maybe other behaviors like how do they transact. For example, Kenya is big on mobile money. They've been exposed to it for a very long time. So if you are running a fintech campaign, the way you communicate to people who are in an economy that is heavily reliant on mobile money will be different from the way you communicate to audience in a place like Nigeria, where there's a lot of cash account still going on side by side with the fintech infrastructure that we are currently running. So you have to consider things like culture also. How you speak to people in Kenya will be different from how you speak to people in Nigeria. And it's not just about translation. You're not just translating a campaign that you have built centrally to fit into the culture in Nigeria or to fit into the culture in Kenya. You have to have built from the ground up when you are building strategies for your campaign, considering the language of the people here and the language of people there. So you just have a central component of the campaign that is just adapted to speak a little bit differently to the people here and a little bit different to the people there. You also have to look at what kind of device do they use, what kind of internet are they exposed to. Is it a 4G market? Are you in a 2G market? The file and the format of the ad should be different. Is it in a mobile-dominated market? Now it's desktop was like second screen, right? To millennials in the late 2000s. But now desktop is becoming no screen, like Chibike has mentioned earlier. If your ad is not adapted for small screens, it's not adapted for short video formats. If you are targeting Nigerians, for example, that short video will probably communicate entertainment before it communicates substance. Or you lose them in 1 to 2 seconds. So your substance will get washed with baby water. So at the end of the day, you have to consider a lot of behavioral metrics to determine what market you are targeting and how you want to target the market. How did I answer your question?
Yes, I think you've answered that quite comprehensively, that beyond the demographics, you also have to consider audience behavior quite a lot. So to Alvin, I think still around reaching the right audience, how would you then balance reach versus relevance? So especially with scaling, you might be reaching, yes, 100K people in a certain region within a certain time period, but how do you ensure that your ads remain relevant even as you're trying to still scale them across countries?
Give it the opportunity. I think when it comes to reach versus relevance, the most important thing is looking at the psychometrics of who your customer is, right? Where do they buy? How do they buy? What are the trust signals they're looking at? For example, I'll give you a good example. When people are looking to buy our services for digital marketing, the first place they're going to go is an answer engine. So they'll go to ChatGPT or they'll go to Gemini and prompt us a survey of questions, right? Who's the best digital marketing agency? What is an appropriate budget for digital marketing and all these things? And so those questions or those pain points that particular person has is the particular relevance. What is important to note is that when it comes to these tools, these social media tools, search engines, answer engines as well, is most people use these tools for themselves. So yes, you could be achieving a high amount of reach. Let's say you are running an ad about let's say an electrical switchboard system or a generator system. Now that is very, very specific to a particular audience. You can run the ad across Kenya and reach multiple millions of Kenyans, which metrics look great, right? Vanity metrics might look really, really good. But we're not reaching architects, we're not reaching electrical engineers, we're not reaching people who would be particularly interested in that particular product. So one of the things that people really, really make a mistake about, I've seen in the long term, is not understanding where your audience is in terms of the brand journey. As we get discussed, a lot of Africans stay in the awareness space. They need to see your brand, have that presence, and then that builds up the trust within your brand, and then now they take agency to reach out to your brand. So as much as you might be getting the good metrics, 100K reach, but if it didn't reach a subset of the engineers who could have bought that switchboard for millions of Kenya shillings or set up a plant, for example, then you're not reaching the right people. And just to add on, I think a bit about what Yomi said earlier, I think it's really, really important to note how the way Africans are using these particular platforms is different from how other markets use these platforms. For example, WhatsApp is essentially an e-commerce platform, the way I look at it. People come in, let's say I see shoes on Instagram, I like the shoes, I want to negotiate for those shoes and the price. They can be delivered today, and I want to now form and say, I'll pay on delivery, right? That means I can confirm the quality of the shoe, which changes the entire model of how people order. right? Because abroad, for example, you find people who order through Amazon, make the payment, and then the product arrives. Whereas in African countries, you will see that change. So I think it's at the end of the day, when you're looking at reach versus your relevance, I think even if you're relevant to 100 people, but those 100 people are buying from you, it makes way more sense to reach those individuals than reach a group of people and have good vanity metrics, but no ROI to show for it.
All right, thank you for that. And just piggybacking off of what you were talking about with the mistakes that agencies are making, besides the targeting, and you can go first, Alvin, are there other mistakes that you've seen agencies or even brands when they approach you looking to run digital campaigns? Are there other mistakes that they're making that are not allowing their campaigns to scale effectively?
I think one of the most important things is understanding where your audience is in terms of the customer journey. Do they know about your product? Have they seen your product somewhere? Have they heard the word of mouth about your product? That's a key thing. What we find a lot of companies do is they come in and they want to jump all the steps and get people to buy day one, right? And not understanding that this is basically a process, right? The other issue is not understanding what type of marketing channel works for your particular brand as to where you are. Brands are very quick. We get this a lot. We want influencers. And influencers are great, but influencers come at a particular stage within the marketing journey, right? People have seen your product. They're kind of considering buying, but they're not sure yet, right? That would be a great point where the influencer could come in and give that social proof of that social trust for the product. But if you bring in an influencer at the beginning, and this has happened with one of our clients where they brought in an influencer to launch their brand, their restaurant, for example, and basically what ended up happening was the brand was associated directly with the influencer, almost to seem that the influencer owned the restaurant. And so jumping off those stages is one of the key issues. Patience is also another key issue, not understanding, hey, this is going to take time. I'm going to need to see the ad a couple of times before I click. The third thing is, what about your brand are you showcasing, right? And what type of messaging are you giving out? People are, and I say this a lot, is you don't want to put out messaging that is buy now or discounts or that kind of thing, especially depending on where your brand is. For example, if you have a high-end brand, you're selling maybe luxury clothes or luxury shoes or luxury cars, for example, discounts is not something your clientele is looking for, right? So their pain point might they be looking for, I want an authentic place where I can get these authentic goods, whether they're luxury goods, they can be verified and that kind of thing. So knowing where your clientele is. And then the other biggest issue we've seen is hoping for miracles on tiny budgets. So clients come in very excited, want to, take over the world and sell their product. And a lot of times we see a lot of great products. To be honest, we just did one for a new ride-hailing service that's launching in Kenya. And to be honest, we had to be frank that what Uber and Bolt and other competitors are spending in the digital space is in the high hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we had to be frank with the client and just say, hey, we don't think we'll be able to take up this project if this budget doesn't match, because it's not going to make sense. So those are some of the issues we usually typically see from clients. And just lastly, I think there's also a big mismatch between understanding what these products are. And what I mean by that is a lot of the times the decision makers in these companies are of an older generation. So when you're telling them, hey, you need to do TikToks, they're not understanding the power or the relevance of doing video ads, right? Or if you tell them you can't do AI ads for such a big brand, right? It makes your brand look cheap. So them not understanding that, or not understanding what is SEO, what is designing the new website going to help them with. Those are also teething issues that currently we are in, but people are learning. So those are the key areas I see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Yomi, I don't know if you have any other challenges or issues like that you've encountered, especially in the West African region, that you would want to highlight.
Well, I think starting off from where Elvin left off, big dreams, small budgets, or realistic budgets. I think it's a continent-wide problem. Let's put it that way. But I think beyond that also, I think it's also the other side of that is unrealistic expectations, that sometimes well, not all clients, some clients come with, right? It's the fact that you have budgetary constraints. And with those budgetary constraints, as professionals, you're being advised that, okay, this will get us this, but then, clients just still want, I don't want to speak to specific concerns, but for example, you have instances where a client has not increased a budget in 3 years. And the budget that in year one was able to fetch you, I'm giving an example, 50,000 new subscribers, is the same budget you expect to win you 200,000 subscribers 3 years down the line. The questions that are being asked are, number one, what is the value of money 3 years ago versus the value of money today? What is the purchasing power of that money, even in the context of ad buying and whatnot, versus today? And when you look at things like the exchange rates, depreciation, all these different things, it is obvious that it doesn't make sense. But you have clients sometimes just being unrealistic and saying, hey, it's what it is, and this is our expectation, these are budget realities. So, but as much as that is a reality, I don't want to focus too much on that. I think the last, should I say, challenge that I have seen also is the fact that there's also this assumption that there's and that's why I like where Chibike started from in the conversations around Dochase, is the fact that there's also a myopia in the sense that advertising is digital marketing and advertising is seen to revolve solely around social networks. And that for me is very, very myopic, right? Is the fact that sometimes getting clients to understand that there's a larger universe, right? A massive universe when we talk about digital advertising and really sort of engagements with clients and consumers. But it's sort of sometimes a steep hill to climb to try to educate clients to understand that, hey, it's not just about TikTok, it's not just about Meta. They seem to be the more familiar ones, and then everybody tends to want to, stay in, comfort zones in that sense. But then I think it's really about educating the category to understand that there's so much more. And then that's being, what will open up, more opportunities. Well, what I would like to know, even for spend, but also in terms of generating the right, traction for the brands that we serve. So I think those are the, probably just adding on to what Elvin has said, those are some of the issues or challenges that I've also seen as well.
All right, yeah. And I think all the marketing managers in the room can agree. You've been given a small budget, and then you're being asked a week into the campaign, where are my leads or where are my subscriptions? And you're wondering, okay, you also need to give it time, as you've said, and understanding budgetary constraints as well. And then now moving to the role of platforms and the different emerging technologies that we have. To you, Abiodun, how would you say these platforms are helping, especially with the challenges that have been raised? So things like the targeting and understanding where your audience is and how to reach them at the right time. And even with measurement as well, how do you report to your clients or to the agencies that you're working with? These are the results, and this is what they mean. This is how we can optimize. So how would programmatic platforms, for instance, Dochase, how do they come into this conversation and ensure that your campaigns are more effective?
Thank you, Joy. So I'll just draw from my experience here at not just at Dochase, but because I've been working in the programmatic space since like 2020. One of the major challenges of running campaigns on the open web and apps in Africa before now has just been fragmentation. Not that it's not still fragmented, but it just lowered the entry level for brand managers and for agencies who found it really difficult to gather authentic data for targeting, get their reporting aligned and accurate, and for transparency also. I think before now you would contact a publisher, you would pay the publisher to run ads. The publishers will send you a report that comes from where you don't know. You would have to take the reports, like that, and optimize and form strategies based on this kind of reporting. So at the end of the day, the audience is what the publisher tells you the audience is. the user behavior is what the publisher tells you the user behavior is. But where programmatic and I would say DSPs come in is to help you to access more authentic data on websites and apps that have been certified to not do ad frauds. And you can also be assured that your brand is safe on all those sites. So there will be no content or ads, that your brands cannot be found around on all those spaces. And then they help you to also streamline pricing, because pricing was also a problem. Getting CPM rates that are just based on a publisher's mood, or a publisher's rent is almost due and they just jack up the price, so you pay premium for low quality traffic. Programmatic platforms like Dochase make sure that that stops. There is a fixed CPM rate that you can pay and appear on maybe as much as 20 publishing sites and apps at the same time. Dochase is tracking on a real-time basis. You have access to a dashboard, meaning if you're a brand manager, you can report to your bosses at any given time of the day. You can provide data on how the ad is performing. You can look at data yourself. You can look at what's working, what creatives are working, what creative is not working. And then on top of it, because of the movement from the behavior shift that has made people start to love short videos that are more entertaining and offer substance after being entertaining. It means static banners are no longer doing it on the open web. And you don't have the creative resources to always come up with dynamic, rich media creatives that will capture attention. So Dochase, for example, can take care of that for you. There is already an AI-powered rich media generator that will generate a rich media that is relevant based on the kind of behavior that you want to drive. If you want people, for example, to take a survey on your banner, it's possible. If you want people to, if it's a skincare product, for example, we have done campaigns where people can impute what their most insecure skin condition is that they've been managing for years. And then, the banner will bring out the result of a particular type of cream by that brand that they should buy. So ads are now becoming even more educative, not just informative. So Dochase takes care of all of this for a partner, and then make sure that all you can now focus on is the overhead strategy in terms of what kind of results are you generating and how do you want to use this result to impact your bottom line, instead of just working on creatives, working on reporting, and all these other mundane tasks that don't necessarily help you affect your bottom line. Yeah. I hope that was.
Yes, that answered that question comprehensively. Thank you for that. And just again to Alvin and Yomi now, from the practical point of view, as people working in agencies, where does that sort of platform fit into your overall media strategy? And what kind of things do you evaluate when you're choosing a partner, either a DSP or whatever it may be, to scale with for your campaigns? What things do you look at and what do you consider? We can start with you, Alvin, and then Yomi, you can also give us your perspective.
Yeah. So basically, we're looking at a particular channel to go with. One, we want to look at what the brand is aiming to do. First of all, what type of brand is it, right? Obviously, if it's a B2B brand, LinkedIn for sure, the meta is good enough. But if you're a restaurant, for example, then Instagram and TikTok are your best friends. So one, understanding a brand alignment between the type of brand, the channel, and the goal they want to achieve, right? So usually, we usually make this joke at the office saying digital is interesting because billboard, the only metric you can give is eyeballs. But when it comes to digital, there's a whole 10 lists of metrics that we even have a glossary to explain the metrics before we explain them. And constantly our clients don't understand them. And what we came to learn is basically what we came to understand is it's about insight breakdown. So On the digital side, all these platforms, they give you all this data, impression reach, page engagements, and they all sound nice and trackable, of course. But most people or most decision makers don't care about that. And what we've come to see is we want to pick a channel that we can be able to break down the data and give insight that matters to the client. For example, if we're working with a money remittance app that's a startup in Kenya, then social proof is a key thing. So looking at metrics like gaining them quality followers based on targeted audience psychometrics that we've built, making sure that, let's say, for example, if they're targeting Kenyans in the UK, we're able to get Kenyans from the UK to follow the page, right? That's a metric that matters. For example, working with a restaurant, he doesn't really care about number of followers. Restaurants have a huge follower amount technically, but very rarely do they convert. What restaurant owner cares about is, am I able to make covers? Were there enough WhatsApp bookings, right? So those are the insights that matter to that person. So on the remittance app side, they care about the followers, yes, but they also care about their download rate. How many people had downloaded the app? How many people downloaded and used the app after first time use, after maybe the $20 free kind of thing. Those are some of the things that our audience or our clients typically look at. So, and all in all, what we try to do as an agency is make sure that we understand where the client is, right? What is the client's pain point? Who is the client trying to talk to? Where is the audience? Where does the audience want to be spoken to? And how do they want to be spoken to? That's another key thing, right? So once you achieve that, then we know which channels to use and which metrics are important. At the end of the day, from my experience running an agency, most decision makers just want insight into what the metrics are doing. A lot of the times you get a pushback saying these are vanity metrics. So giving them a breakdown of metrics that matter to their business, whether that's covers, downloads, that kind of thing, that is what matters. So that is what we look at.
Thank you. Yomi?
Okay, great. You did make disservice by making Elvin go first, because now I said everything that needs to be said. All right, but I will just throw in a couple of things in addition. A term I really hate, but has come to stay is ROMI, return on marketing investments, right? Every major client that is partnering with the decent budget is asking for return on marketing investment. And that, I think it's also important because I'm being honest, and I raise my hand up to say we're on this side of the divide are also sometimes major corporates, right? So we just do things for doing sake, or we used to, let's put it that way. So I think in some instances, clients also demanding, some level of accountability to say, okay, for whatever spend is going to be going into campaigns, there needs to be return on that marketing investment, right? And that in itself has, by its very nature, put on a layer of intentionality on we agencies, ad managers, across the divide to say, okay, for every dollar that's going to be spent on a campaign, how do we ensure that we guarantee, this return on marketing investment? And that in itself, is one of the areas, aside obviously all that Elvin has spoken about, that sort of informs how do I go about spending my marketing budget, especially as it has to do with ads and, lead generation and whatnot, because it's no longer just about doing it for doing sake. It's looking at what platforms will give us the greatest mileage, the greatest traction, and help us achieve the goals that we need to achieve, right? And that's where analytics and things of that nature becomes very, very critical. Abiodun spoke on that to an extent in terms of what and how Dochase helps you do that. But then this becomes so critical because you are now, not just going with the vibes of things. It's really now saying what, even historically and from a data-driven POV, has shown the best ability to convert or to give you the traction that you want to get. And that's, to what Elvin has spoken about in terms of what are the goals that the brand wants to achieve in terms of the very purpose for which it's taking the ad. So that's one very important part around roaming. The second thing I really want to say is I am very counter status quo. And what I mean is that I find it very irritating personally, and those who work with me and work for me probably know this by now. I find it very irritating that the moment we need to do a campaign, the first thing we start thinking is channels. Channels are not the campaign. It is. Let me frame my thoughts this way. Everything that we do, whether it's advertising, whether it's the ad networks or whatever else it is whether we like it or not, it's still premised on technology. And technology, the basis of technology, the very anchor of technology, is the same thing: garbage in, garbage out. So whatever it is that we're going to be putting in, the quality of the inputs is what will determine the quality of the outputs, whether we like it or not, right? And what we tend to do is that we just tend to outsource performance to channels, not understanding that whatever the channels we use, whether it's an ad network or whatever else it is going to be at the mercy of the quality of the inputs we put in. Let me even use AI, as a case point. The quality of the outputs that you get from the most powerful AI platforms, whether you like it or not, is subject to the quality of the prompts that you put in, right? So I think there's also the part of really understanding the consumers, even before the consumers, understanding the product and your clients in terms of what it is that they want to achieve, but then mirroring that sort of versus the type of consumers for whom this would be important, and then working backwards to say that this consumer is not linear, because now sometimes we tend to. And again, I'm not disputing the fact that, for example, if we want to do a B2B campaign, LinkedIn could be the most effective. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that, for example, if you further dimension, even for a B2B client, the question is, will LinkedIn even be a platform that would even convert as well as against, for example, if we actually invested that time and amount of money on a properly curated email marketing campaign, for example, right? So it's really about the fact that I think there's this bit around really understanding the consumer, understanding the nuance and the context of each consumer, and that in itself then informing the platform choices and the channels, and not necessarily defaulting, to certain platforms. I just assume because it's this is what works, because that works. We've seen it happen, not once, not twice, where we make those assumptions because that is what is universally assumed, and it bombs out badly, right? Which is why data always needs to lead, right? Data always needs to lead. And let's always, remember that there's always the general context, but there's always a nuanced context to everything. That nuanced context is for me, and in my own experience, is what determines whether it actually works or it doesn't work. When we go with the general context, it's a gamble. It may work, it may not work, right? It's just assuming that two betting companies, because the two betting companies have somewhat the same audience in inverted commas and have the same budget will achieve the same results. It doesn't always work that way. So what additional nuance, and that's where insights, and that's where I think what Dochase and has is really critical, because it's really about understanding the not so obvious detail, the not so obvious data, the things that gives you contextual insights that could give you an edge, a bit of an edge in making a decision that could actually determine whether or not your campaign is more effective or not, that kind of thing. So I think those are just the additional builds I just want to add to what Irvin has said. But I think definitely in the choice of platforms needs to, or let me put it this way, people should inform the choice of platforms. And when I say people in this sense, it's consumer on one side, but also the product for which that consumer needs, and then what would be the best platform that would then help us deliver that. And obviously, more often than not, I tend to find that it's better as a mix. So that's what I'll say.
Okay, thank you, Yomi. I think I liked garbage in, garbage out. I'll keep that in mind even as I'm running my own campaigns, because it's very true. What you put in is what you will get out. So understanding context is key. Having that strategic approach, not just running ads for the sake of running ads. Understanding your audience and your client. So as we just wrap up, in the interest of time, I'd love to continue this conversation. I think we're getting some really great insights from all of you, but just to wrap up, I want you to each give us one key piece of advice. So for everyone in the room, if there's one thing that they should take away from this session, what should they be doing differently, or what is coming? What should they adapt to or adapt for? Just one key piece of advice really quickly. Yomi, you can start us off, and then Abiodun, then we finish with Alvin.
All right. Key advice: garbage in, garbage out. Make sure that we actually do not outsource our understanding of our industries, of the customers, of our targets solely to third-party platforms. I think it's important that we also understand what works, because no matter how efficient AI is, no matter how efficient programmatic platforms are, even for us to be able to, and I love the fact that, for example, when Chibuike was playing the videos, you could see personas. But if you don't even personally understand the personas you're trying to target, how do you know which one to lean into in the first place? So I think there's the responsibility of discipline on us as brand owners, brand managers, whatever the case may be, to ensure that we also understand or take the discipline, the time to understand the nuances of our context and our consumers. And then that would help us, make better decisions that would translate to us. The obvious second piece of advice I'll give is, of course, it makes common sense, sign up to Dochase if you already have not, and then hopefully that works. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Yomi. Abiodun, over to you.
Thank you. I think the overwhelming thing, I think, in our discussion today has been to stop looking at Africa as a market. Africa is not one market. Even to some extent, Nigeria is not even one market. So that is discussion for another day. And also, like Yomi has said, if you would outsource anything, you should outsource how data is being generated, how data is being used for performance to the people that know how to do it best, which is Dochase. So yeah, shameless plug. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't mind. Alvin, last words.
I just think two things are important to note for any business and anybody who's trying to push out their products out there. It's really, really important to note that, for example, 42% of Kenyans use ChatGPT for their search inquiries, or Perplexity for their search inquiries. So looking into answer engine optimization or generative engine optimization for your websites especially is a really, really key area that of advice that I would give anybody right now in 2026 and who's trying to get ahead, especially in terms of search. Simply because of this, you need to also look at the consumer's logic when they're doing these searches. When someone is doing a Google search, they're simply, just doing a Google search. When someone is on a generative engine or an AI, for example, they're inquiring questions and they're building a conversation. Naturally, as humans, when we build conversations, we build trust, right? Which affects directly our agency or our ability to make a decision. And I can tell you for a fact, majority of our clients now in Kenya are finding us through ChatGPT or finding us through Gemini. So this is a key area that we just have to look at. And then on the flip side is content when it comes to generating content with AI. Now, what we've noticed is that the audience is kind of shaping how they want AI content to be seen. They are way more forgiving of smaller and start out brands that are using AI. They would say internally, they'll say, maybe they didn't have a graphic designer, they didn't have this, they don't have the funds to do this. But they are very less forgiving of very big brands. Recently, a very big bank in Kenya launched an ad, which was AI-based, and it got a lot of pushback. So figuring out, I know we're all trying to figure out how to use these tools, and these tools are making us more efficient. But then also remember that direct, like you guys have talked about garbage in, garbage out, the quality of your content indirectly communicates to your clients, who is to buy this product and who is not to buy this product. So that's just something to take into consideration as well. So those are the 2 pointers I have.
Okay, thank you so much to all our panelists. I'm being told we have Irene Mwangi in the room. She is the, let me just confirm her role here. She's the country manager for Dochase here in Kenya. Irene, I'll just let you say hi. And if anybody wants to reach you on this side of the continent, you can let us know how to do that.
Hi, Joy, and everyone else. How are you?
Fine,
That has
thank
been
you.
a very great session. So, yeah, my name is Irene Mwangi. I am the business lead in Kenya, and I'm happy to help businesses here and brands to scale across programmatic and help them in strategy as well. I can be reached through irene.mwangi@dochase.com. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Irene. It's lovely to meet you. You can just put your email in the chat. So if anybody wants to copy that, they can do it real quickly. But yes, thank you once again to everyone. I'll give about 5 minutes now. Open it up if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you want to just say thank you to the panelists for their insights, or you want to find out how you can continue the conversation with them, you can share with us in the chat or in the Q&A. just as we wrap up today's session. But yes, thank you once again to Alvin, Abiodun, Yomi, Chibuike, Irene, and the entire Dochase team. Thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing all the insights, the wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot as somebody who does performance marketing, and I'm sure everyone in the room can agree. Yes. So if there are no questions, we can proceed to close, but I'll just give about 2 more minutes. And in the meantime, for all the panelists, you can also tell us how people can reach you or how they can find your agency as well. Alvin, you can go first.
I'm just gonna put my comms in the chat. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'll share my email, and you can obviously find us on GPT #1 search. So something we're really proud of. So I'll put that in the chat.
Okay. Thank you. Yomi, how about you? Okay, so Yomi has shared his email.
I shared in the chat as well. So anyone can reach me. We're happy to have a conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Abiodun, I know Chibuike had shared his contact. Irene has shared hers. You can also give us yours.
Yes, I just shared mine, so you can reach me via belton.media@dochase.com. You can find me on LinkedIn also, and we can take this conversation offline. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much to all our attendees. Thank you once again for joining us. I'm seeing there are no questions, but there is a lot of gratitude. So we also really appreciate you being here and engaging with us. These sessions would be of no value if we were talking to ourselves. So thank you so much for joining us. To reiterate, we will share the recording and we'll share the presentation done by Dochase. So keep an eye out on your email and you'll be getting that. And also just some short clips from this session. If you'd want to see those on our social media, we'll be sharing those as the month progresses. And yeah, if you would want to join us for future sessions, we have another webinar lined up next week and the week after that. So look through our website, our social media, you'll be able to find all the details on joining. And also on joining PAAN, if you're an agency, if you're a client, you're a freelancer, you'd want to be part of this network, we'd love to have you. You can find all the information on our website. That's PAAN, PAAN.Africa, and you'll be able to see what we do and how you can get involved. Thank you once again, and I wish you all a lovely afternoon from wherever you are, and see you in the next session. All right, bye-bye.